The train arrived at the dusty platform of Iron Creek not with a grand screech, but with a tired, hissing sigh, as if it were as weary of the vast prairie as the passengers within its iron belly. The late afternoon sun painted everything in long, golden shadows, stretching out from the simple wooden buildings of the town like fingers reaching for the horizon. Sheriff Amos Rourke leaned against a post on the platform, his sharp eyes missing nothing. Beside him stood Caleb Hartwell, the widowed rancher, his hat pulled low, and his daughter Lily, a small, quiet shadow clinging to his leg. Caleb's heart thumped a steady, anxious rhythm against his ribs. He'd written for a wife. It was a practical thing. The ranch was too much for one man, the house too quiet, and Lily needed a woman's touch. He'd asked for someone kind, someone gentle. In his mind, he pictured someone small and soft, a quiet creature who would move lightly through his heavy world, who wouldn't make him feel the weight of his own grief more than he already did. He'd described his late wife, a little in his letter, her delicate ways. He hadn't meant to, but it had seeped out. The train car door opened and a few people descended. A salesman with a large case, a weary-looking older couple. And then she appeared. Eliza Mayrow stepped down onto the platform, the wooden boards creaking softly under her boots. She carried a worn carpetbag in one hand and smoothed her simple, mended travel dress with the other. The journey had been long, and it showed in the faint smudges under her calm eyes. She was not small. She was a woman of substance, full-figured from a life of labor, with a wide, steady frame, strong shoulders, and capable hands that rested patiently at her sides. Her face was plain but pleasant, and her brown hair was tucked neatly under a simple bonnet. She did not look around wildly but took in the town and the waiting party with a single, quiet glance that held neither fear nor boldness, only a patient readiness. Caleb felt his hope, a fragile thing he hadn't even fully admitted to carrying, drop and settle like a stone in his gut. This wasn't what he'd pictured. Not at all. She seemed to take up more space than he'd prepared for, not in a loud way, but in a solid, undeniable way that made the air feel different. Disappointment, sharp and immediate, washed over him. It wasn't cruelty in his heart, just a deep, weary sense of a mistake. He'd wanted a wisp of smoke to drift into his life, and instead, here stood a sturdy oak tree. He swallowed hard, his jaw tight. He was a man of his word, and he would not be unkind. But he couldn't find a smile. He muttered under his breath, words meant only for the sheriff beside him. "This isn't who I expected." Sheriff Amos Rourke, a man whose face was a map of lines drawn by sun and wisdom, didn't turn. He didn't frown in sympathy or nod in agreement. A slow, gentle smile touched his lips, as if he'd just heard a secret punchline to a joke only he understood. He said nothing. Eliza's eyes found them, the serious man, the watchful older man smiling, and the thin, wide-eyed little girl. She walked toward them, her steps measured and sure. "Mr. Hartwell?" she asked, her voice softer than her frame might suggest, but clear as a bell. "Ma'am," Caleb said, tipping his hat. He introduced Lily, who peeked out from behind him, and Sheriff Amos. Eliza nodded to each, her eyes lingering on Lily with a warmth that didn't require a smile. She saw the disappointment in Caleb's eyes. She was used to seeing it, in shopkeepers who looked past her, at socials where men chose other dance partners. She did not flinch. She did not apologize for her shape or her presence. She simply stood, waiting. "Your trunk, ma'am?" Caleb asked, his voice formal. "Yes. Thank you," she replied. The ride to the ranch in his wagon was quiet, filled only with the sounds of horses and wheels. Lily stared at Eliza the whole way. The little girl who had learned that good things could disappear, watched this new large presence with a bird-like intensity. She didn't see disappointment. She saw someone who looked steady, someone who wouldn't blow away in the wind. The ranch house was a solid, lonely structure. Caleb showed Eliza to a small, clean room at the back of the house, separate from his own. "You can stay here," he said, his words careful. "As a guest. We can see how things go. The housework, cooking for the hands, it's a lot. I'd be obliged for the help while we get to know the situation." It was a polite, distant offer. A housekeeper's arrangement, not a courtship. Eliza understood perfectly. She placed her carpetbag on the bed. "I am happy to be useful, Mr. Hartwell," she said, and she meant it. She hadn't come to be admired. She had come to work, to belong somewhere. If that was all this would be, she would do it well. That night, after a simple supper she prepared, Caleb sat on his porch, staring at the stars. Sheriff Amos's smile haunted him. Why had the man smiled? Was he laughing at Caleb's predicament? The town would hear of this by Sunday. They'd see the large, plain woman he'd brought back and they'd talk. He felt a fresh wave of weary shame. He'd wanted to fix his lonely life, but he'd only added to its weight. Inside, in her small room, Eliza knelt beside her bed. She didn't pray for Caleb to find her pretty. She didn't pray for an easy life. She folded her strong hands and whispered, "Lord, thank you for the journey's end. Let my hands be helpful here. Let me lighten this man's burden, even if he never sees me while I do it. And comfort that little girl's heart. Amen." Then she rose, unpacked her few things and prepared for dawn. Her story, she felt, would be one of quiet usefulness, and she had decided long ago that such a story was a worthy one to live. The rhythm of the ranch began to wrap around Eliza like a familiar apron. She rose before the sun, her movements in the quiet house as sure as the coming of daylight. She stirred the embers in the stove, added wood, and set coffee to boil before Caleb's boots even hit the floorboards. He would emerge, nod a silent thanks, gulp the coffee and head out to the barn, the door closing on the world of men and animals. Eliza would then begin her real work. She didn't try to change things, she learned them. She found where the flour was kept, how the ranch hands liked their beans, which pot boiled water fastest. She cooked meals that were simple but plentiful, thick stews, golden cornbread, biscuits that rose high and light. The first time the 6 ranch hands filed in for the midday meal, they were braced for the sorry cooking of a grieving man or the fussy attempts of a new woman. What they found were plates heaped with good, honest food that tasted of care and skill. They ate in surprised silence, then with growing appreciation. One grizzled older hand, named Ben, tipped his hat to her after the 3rd day. "Mighty fine grub, ma'am," he said, and the others murmured agreement. It was the first respect offered, and Eliza accepted it with a quiet nod, her hands already busy clearing. She noticed everything. She saw the tear in the sleeve of Caleb's work shirt, the way Lily's dress was too short at the wrists, the hollow look in the little girl's eyes at bedtime. Without asking, she took up mending. She sat in the evening by the lamplight, her capable fingers moving the needle with swift, sure stitches. She mended Caleb's shirt. She let out the cuffs on Lily's dress and patched the worn knee of her pinafore. She found a discarded, ragged doll of Lily's, its stuffing coming out, and she carefully restored it, adding 2 tiny new button eyes. Lily watched her. At first, from a distance, then from the doorway, then finally she crept into the room and sat on the floor near Eliza's feet, playing silently with the restored doll. Eliza didn't push. She didn't demand conversation. She simply hummed a soft old hymn as she worked, her presence a warm, silent song in the house. One afternoon, Lily, holding her doll, pointed to a button on Eliza's sewing box. "That's pretty," she whispered, her first voluntary words to Eliza. "It is," Eliza agreed softly, picking it up. "It looks like a little pearl. Would you like to keep it?" Lily's eyes went wide and she nodded. Eliza placed the button in her small palm, and Lily closed her fingers around it like a treasure. Caleb saw these small things from the corners of his life. He saw his mended shirt, the full bellies of his men, the way Lily now lingered in the same room as Eliza. He heard the soft hymns from the kitchen in the evenings. His politeness toward Eliza remained, but it was a wall, and behind it, his confusion grew. He'd been so sure of what he needed, and this woman was none of it. Yet she was fixing things. Not with loud declarations, but with stew and stitches and silent sitting. It unsettled him. He found himself watching her sometimes, not with the eyes of a man looking at a woman, but with the puzzlement of a man studying an unexpected but useful tool. Sheriff Amos visited one Saturday bringing a piece of mail. He found Eliza in the kitchen, her hands coated in flour, rolling out pie dough while Lily sat at the table, carefully stringing dried beans on a thread. The scene was so peaceful, so utterly right, that Amos stopped in the doorway for a moment, just taking it in. The house, which had felt cold and hollow for so long, hummed with a gentle warmth. "Afternoon, Miss Mayrow," he said, his smile easy now. "Sheriff," she greeted him. "Coffee's hot." He accepted a cup, leaning against the counter. "Looks like you're settling in just fine." "The work is good," she replied simply, not looking up from her crust. Caleb came in from the yard, wiping his hands. He saw Amos smiling at Eliza, saw Lily content, and felt that strange prickling frustration again. Why did everyone else accept this so easily? After Amos left, Caleb stood in the kitchen, the scent of baking pie filling the air. "The hands say you're a fine cook," he said, the words coming out more abruptly than he intended. Eliza looked at him, her gaze steady. "I am glad it suits them," she said. "A man works hard, he ought to eat well." There was no fishing for a compliment, no coyness. Just a statement of fact. That night, his frustration simmered into something else, a flicker of unwanted attraction. He passed by her partially open door on his way to bed and saw her kneeling again, her broad back straight, her head bowed in prayer. The lamplight outlined her form, and for a fleeting moment, he didn't see size or plainness. He saw strength, devotion, a profound and quiet focus that was entirely feminine. He jerked back as if stung, his heart hammering. He went to his own room, disturbed. He wasn't supposed to feel anything for her. He was supposed to be patiently waiting for this arrangement to prove itself a mistake. But the mistake, it seemed, was increasingly his own. Eliza, in her prayers, asked for none of the turmoil in his heart. Father, thank you for the beans and the flour. Thank you for Lily's small smile today. Help me to do better tomorrow. Help Mr. Hartwell to find some peace for his weariness. Your will be done. She rose, blew out the lamp, and slept the deep, untroubled sleep of one who has done an honest day's work. The roots, though no one saw them, were beginning to grip the soil of this hard, dry place. The weather turned not with a gentle warning, but with a sudden, furious intent. The sky, which had been a flat, iron gray all day, finally broke open just as the first flakes began to fall. They were not gentle flakes, but hard pellets of ice that quickly gave way to a blinding, swirling wall of white. The blizzard screamed down from the north, swallowing the prairie and sealing the Hartwell ranch in a frozen, howling tomb. All practical thought of disappointment or awkwardness vanished. Survival took center stage. Caleb and his men fought a desperate, losing battle against the cold, trying to secure the animals in the barn, their shouts torn away by the wind. Inside the house, Eliza became the silent commander of a different front. She moved with a calm urgency that filled Lily with awe, not fear. She brought in every available container and set them by the door to collect snow to melt for water. She checked the woodpile by the back door, organizing it for easy access. She lit every lamp as the world outside turned an eerie, early dark. The wind howled like a dying animal, shaking the windows, but inside, Eliza kept the stove roaring, a defiant heart of heat against the cold. For 3 days the world was reduced to white noise and relentless chill. Caleb and the men, their faces raw and exhausted, would stumble in for brief respites, their clothes stiff with ice. Each time they found the house shockingly warm, a pot of soup or coffee always on, and Eliza there, handing them dry blankets or a steaming mug without a word. She worked tirelessly, melting snow, cooking, feeding the fire, calming Lily, and she did it all without complaint, her face a mask of serene concentration. Her body, which Caleb had thought too much, now seemed a fortress of capability. He watched her lift a heavy log into the stove, her arms strong and sure. He saw her carry 2 full buckets of water from the melt barrel without a stagger. This was not soft delicacy. This was the solid, enduring strength that kept hearts beating and homes standing when the world tried to freeze them out. On the 3rd night, the storm reached its peak. The men were bedded down in the barn, keeping watch over the trembling livestock. Lily, exhausted by fear and confinement, finally cried herself to sleep in her small bed. Caleb came inside, his body aching with a cold that had seeped into his bones. He expected darkness, silence. Instead, he found the main room bathed in the warm, low glow of the banked fire. And there was Eliza, asleep in the rocking chair. She had clearly been mending, a work shirt of his was folded in her lap, a needle still tucked into the collar. Her head had fallen back against the chair, her face softened in sleep, looking younger and utterly weary. The fierce, capable energy that had animated her for days was gone, replaced by a vulnerable stillness. She had worked herself to complete exhaustion without saying a single word about it. A feeling swelled in Caleb's chest, so powerful it stole his breath. It was a mix of profound gratitude, aching guilt, and something else. A fierce, protective tenderness that burned away the last of his cold disappointment. He moved quietly. He took the heavy quilt from the back of the sofa and gently, so gently, laid it over her. His hand brushed her shoulder, and he let it rest there for a heartbeat, feeling the solid, real warmth of her through the fabric. She did not stir. He was about to turn away when a soft sound came from her slightly parted lips. Not a snore, but a murmur. He paused, listening. It was a prayer, so faint it was almost part of the wind's dying moan outside. Keep them safe, Lord. The men, the beasts, give Caleb strength, his burden is so heavy. Let Lily feel no fear, wrap her in your peace, and let my hands continue to be useful here. Not for me but for them. Your will. Caleb stood frozen, her words searing into his soul. She wasn't praying for him to love her. She wasn't praying for comfort or an easy path. She was praying for him. For his strength. For his child's peace. For the simple ability to keep serving them. In that moment, the scales fell from his eyes with an almost physical force. He saw not a woman who failed to match an image, but a woman of breathtaking, selfless strength. He saw a heart so large it prayed for others in its own exhausted sleep. He saw the anchor he had been drifting without. He didn't need someone small. His life was a storm-tossed sea. He needed someone solid, an anchor that would hold fast against any gale. And God, in his wisdom, had sent him a mighty one, disguised as something he hadn't thought to ask for. The final knot of resistance in his heart unraveled, leaving behind a raw, awestruck humility. He looked at her sleeping form, now covered by his quilt, and for the first time, he saw not just usefulness, but a beautiful answered prayer he'd been too blind to name. The blizzard passed, leaving a world smothered in a deep, brilliant silence. As the ranch dug out, a different kind of thaw took place within the walls of the house. Caleb Hartwell looked at Eliza Mayrow with new eyes, eyes that had been scrubbed clean by the storm's fury. He didn't declare his change of heart with grand speeches. He showed it. He began to seek her out not just at mealtimes. He found her in the garden plot, turning the cold earth over with a spade. "That'll be a fine sight come summer," he said, leaning on the fence post. His voice was no longer just polite, it held a note of genuine interest. Eliza paused, wiping her brow with the back of her wrist. "The soil is good. It'll take beans and squash well." She looked at him, a question in her quiet gaze. His distance had been a familiar chill. This new attention was a puzzling sun. "I imagine it will," he agreed. He began to stay on the porch after supper instead of retreating to the barn. He'd talk of the ranch, of the new calves, of his hopes for the herd. And he'd ask about her journey west, the family she'd left behind, her thoughts on the Sunday sermon. Conversations unfolded, slow and careful, like tender green shoots breaking through hard ground. The town noticed. When they went to church on Sunday, Caleb didn't walk ahead or beside her with stiff formality. He offered her his arm as they navigated the muddy street. A subtle, spicy current of awareness began to flow between them. It was in the way his fingers lingered when he took a plate from her, sending a warm jolt up her arm. It was in the way her cheeks would flush when she caught him watching her from across the yard, his gaze no longer puzzled but warm with a growing admiration. It was in the shared, quiet laugh over Lily's attempt to milk a cow, their eyes meeting in a moment of pure, unguarded joy. One afternoon, Sheriff Amos rode out. He found Caleb fixing a harness in the yard, Eliza hanging laundry on the line nearby, Lily chasing a chick between the flapping sheets. Amos dismounted, that same knowing smile in place. "Place looks different," he remarked. "Alive." Caleb followed his gaze to Eliza, who was pinning a sheet with strong, sure motions. "It is," Caleb said simply, no defensiveness left in him. "Told you," Amos said, his voice low. "Sometimes a man prays for a willow tree to be pretty by his creek. But God, he sees the storm coming down the mountain. So he sends an oak. Its roots go deep. It doesn't bend, it stands. And it gives shelter to everything nearby." Caleb nodded, the truth of it settling into his bones. He'd asked for decoration. He'd been given shelter. And he was finally wise enough to be grateful. That evening, with the sky painted in shades of rose and purple, he found Eliza alone on the porch, her mending in her lap once more, but this time she was awake. He sat beside her, the space between them humming with unspoken words. "Eliza," he began, the use of her first name making her look up. "I've been a fool." She didn't contradict him. She waited. "I had a picture in my head. It was small and faded, like an old tintype. I couldn't see anything else. The storm, your prayers, they cleared my sight." He took a deep breath. "Sheriff Amos says God sent me an oak tree when I asked for a willow. He was right. This life is hard ground and high winds. I don't need a willow. I want what you are." He looked at her directly, his weathered face earnest. "My feelings have changed. Deeply. I would be honored, if you'd allow me to court you properly. With Sheriff Amos as chaperone for our walks, and with my honest intention to be the man you deserve." Eliza's needle had stilled. She saw the truth in his eyes, no pity, no reluctant acceptance, but a clear, chosen respect that was blossoming into something more. A warmth, different from the stove's heat, spread through her. She had come hoping only to be useful. The hope of being cherished was a new, delicate bud. "I would like that, Caleb," she said softly. The courtship of Caleb Hartwell and Eliza Mayrow became the quiet talk of Iron Creek, but now the whispers were of a different sort. They were whispers of approval, of a rightness finally settled. Caleb courted her with a proud, open devotion that erased any memory of his first silent disappointment. He brought her wildflowers when he found them by the creek. He took her for walks on Sunday afternoons, with Sheriff Amos or sometimes Lily walking a respectful few paces ahead, a living, giggling chaperone. He listened to her opinions on where to plant the apple saplings he'd ordered. Eliza bloomed under this gentle, consistent sun. A new light came into her eyes and smiles, once rare, came more easily to her lips. She started wearing a simple blue ribbon in her hair on Sundays, and the way Caleb looked at her when she wore it made her feel a beauty she had never known. The spicy tension of their growing love was in the sacred space between their not quite touching hands as they walked, in the way his deep voice would soften when he said her name, in the promise that hung in the air between their shared glances. The proposal came not under a dramatic moon, but in the full, honest light of a spring evening, with the scent of turned earth in the air. They were on the porch, Sheriff Amos rocking in a chair whittling, and Lily drawing in the dirt with a stick. Caleb turned to Eliza, taking both of her strong, capable hands in his own rough ones. The setting was ordinary but the moment was holy. "Eliza," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I was blind. I asked for a pretty flower to look at, something that wouldn't make me remember how hard things can be. But God and life, they needed a mighty tree right here. One with roots so deep nothing could shake it, and branches strong enough to hold up a family." He squeezed her hands. "I need you. All of you. Your strength, your patience, your faith, your capable hands. I love the woman you are. Will you do me the greatest honor? Will you marry me?" Tears welled in Eliza's eyes, but they were tears of pure joy. She saw no shadow of hesitation in his face, only a love that had been earned, chosen, and now proudly claimed. "Yes, Caleb," she whispered. "Yes, I will marry you." Their wedding was held in the small white church, filled with ranch hands, townsfolk, and the sweet scent of early summer lilacs. Eliza wore a simple new dress the color of cream, and Caleb stood tall and straight, his eyes never leaving her face. When the preacher pronounced them man and wife, Caleb's kiss was tender but firm, a seal upon a covenant built on the solid rock of true seeing. After a humble celebration, they returned to the ranch house, their home. As the sunset painted the sky in glory, they stood together on the porch, side by side. Caleb's arm was around Eliza, not holding up something small and delicate, but holding on to something solid, real, and deeply beloved. Lily stood contentedly on Eliza's other side, her small hand tucked securely in her new mother's. Down the road, a rider approached. Sheriff Amos reined in his horse just by their fence. He looked at the picture they made, the sturdy woman, the proud rancher, the healed child, all wrapped in the golden light of evening. He didn't say a word. He just touched the brim of his hat, his eyes crinkling with a satisfaction that ran soul deep. His knowing smile was finally complete, for the truth he had seen from the very first day was now plain for all the world to see, that the greatest blessings are often those we never thought to ask for, and the truest love is the one that sees the heart and chooses to stay. Did this story remind you that true strength and beauty lie within the heart? If you enjoyed this tale of faith, unexpected love, and seeing beyond appearances, please share this story with someone who might need its message today.